Hello, from the Pandemic Center of New York City. I should say pandemic epicenter, the former pandemic epicenter, because, you know, we're so New York tough, as Governor Cuomo put it, we actually flattened the curve. We sent it packing. 10 days ago, we in New York City entered phase 4 of reopening, the so-called final phase. Now, this doesn't mean we're out of the woods. That's what we're going to discuss this evening. It does mean that production can theoretically return to the streets with full crews or to studio spaces, albeit limited to 50% capacity, in theory. And as you know, that's what the news reports say. I think all of you watching this evening already realize that reopening film and TV production in New York City will be a challenge unlike any other we've faced in production, no matter how many years we have in this business. I'm David Leitner. I'm your moderator this evening. I'm a DP. I'm the motion picture chair of SMPTE New York. My co-producer is John Gallagher. He's director of technology at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and he's a SMPTE section manager. He's going to be managing the question and answers at the end. I'd also like to thank Wes Simpson, founder of LearnIPVideo.com. He's providing tech support for us tonight. And a special thanks to my good friend Thomas Turley, who was instrumental in assembling this panel. First, a bit of shopkeeping. Our sponsor for tonight's webinar, One Media 3.0, kindly provided our Zoom platform. Together with Josh Gordon, SMPTE Publicity Chair, they're hosting a webinar next week on ATSC 3.0, Next Generation Advertising. So if you're interested in that, you can use the link at the bottom of the screen. I'm told there's a link. I don't see one, but I'm sure there is. Now,
well, thank you so much.
Hello. I want to explain a little bit about SMPTE. I have a feeling that some people don't know what SMPTE is, but SMPTE is an acronym for the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. We're a 104-year-old organization. We were founded at the dawn of motion pictures. We were there before anybody else. And we were founded by cinematographers, people that built their own cameras, people that wanted to stabilize the dimensions of 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter, who wanted to work out where the sprocket holes were going to be. And that's been our role in the century since. Every time there are standards to be straightened out, to be standardized, we're behind that. We're the reason why, you know, you can load the same 16 and the same 35 millimeter film in every camera and it works. We're the reason why you can plug all the gadgets together. Or I don't know if we want to take credit for why wireless doesn't work sometimes, but anyway, we're behind all those standards. We're not all propeller heads. I'm a director of photography. I've directed and produced features. We're creatives who are technically inclined. And after all, in this business, if you're not technically inclined in the digital age, you're a little bit lost. I'd like to read the bios of the people that are participating today in this discussion. It's an extraordinary group of people. We're very, very proud to be able to put this kind of a panel together. Dejan Georgevich, ASC, is National Vice President of IATSE Local 600. He's an award-winning director cinematographer and a professor of advanced cinematography at the School of Visual Arts here in New York. He's a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, as well as the Directors Guild of America. His credits include Once in a Lifetime, Ordinary Miracles, The Photo Leagues New York, Mercy, Cupid, Hope and Faith, and more. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, we see.
Is that a yes?
Yes, we see.
Okay, I'm only asking because my Zoom completely disappeared. Next up is Andy Shipsides, president of ARRI Rental North America. Andy oversees all the camera rental operations in North America. ARRI, founded in 1917 in Munich, is a leading designer and manufacturer of camera and lighting systems for film and broadcast, with a worldwide distribution and service network. Productions shot with ARRI's acclaimed Alexa digital cinema camera, include Roma, If Beale Street Could Talk, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Irishman, Joker, and Parasite, just a couple of little films from recent times. Peter Abel is CEO and co-founder of AbelCine. AbelCine was founded in 1989 by Pete and his brother Rich as a New York rental house specializing in introducing innovative technologies. They started with Aton Super 16. They were the first to introduce the first generation Panasonic Vericam. Today, AbelCine has facilities in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, offering a range of services from rental, sales, tech, training, engineering to financial. Pete is an associate member of the American Society of Cinematographers. Alan Suna is the owner and CEO of Silvercup Studios. Silvercup is the largest film and television production facility in New York. The studio was the primary shooting facility for ABC's Hope and Faith, HBO's Sex and the City, The Sopranos. It's also known for Netflix's The Politician, HBO's Succession. The list is pretty long. Matt Miller is president and CEO of the Association of Independent Commercial Producers, AICP. And he presides over an organization whose members account for 80 to 85% of all commercials in the United States. He's a spokesman for more than 350 production, editorial, and post companies that, along with another 200 affiliated firms, comprise the AICP membership. Mary Ray Thewlis is National Vice President of the Directors Guild of America. She was a producer, then an executive producer of the acclaimed series, The Americans, on FX, which won multiple industry awards, including the Golden Globe Award for Best Television Series and Drama. Well-deserved, speaking as a fan. Previously, for 15 years, she worked as first assistant director, unit production manager, and producer on various iterations of Law and Order. And lastly, we have Joseph Reidy, first vice chair, Eastern AD, UPM Council, and co-chair First AD Committee of the Directors Guild of America. Joe's known for working closely with Martin Scorsese over the past 20 years in 11 projects. Other A-list directors who have chosen Joe as their right hand include Oliver Stone, Robert Redford, and Sidney Lumet. His list of credits is extensive. As assistant director, as co-producer, even on-screen talent, doing various bit parts, including his favorite, a gambler caught cheating in a scene from Casino with Robert De Niro and Don Rickles. This is an extraordinary panel, as I mentioned. We made an effort to get people from the represented points of view of guilds, points of view of unions, of studio, of rental, because it's going to take everybody to get New York production back up on its feet. Now, earlier today, there was another hour and a half online panel discussion in Los Angeles sponsored by the Hollywood Professional Association. And they brought together an extraordinary panel Michael Cione used to formerly of Panavision, now Frame.io. As you can see, Carolyn Giardina, tech editor at Hollywood Reporter, was the moderator. I watched it, and I highly recommend watching that at some point. It's going to go up online, maybe Vimeo, I'm not quite sure. But it's a bookend to this discussion we're going to have tonight from Los Angeles and Hollywood and industry point of view. And I just wanted to give them a shout out because I thought they did an extraordinary job earlier today. Everybody wants to get back to work. Everybody agrees with this. There isn't anybody that doesn't want to get back to work. So that's kind of a baseline understanding. We all in this are pulling in the same direction. So whatever conflict exists, it exists because people feel there might be different ways to go about this, but everyone wants to get back to work. Now, in pursuit of that, a number of organizations have issued white papers. The Production Equipment Rental Group, which comprises rental facilities, Local 600, cinematographers, AICP, which represents producers of commercials, including editorial and post, the Safeway Forward, which is a combined report by the DGA, SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, and the Teamsters, and a very detailed report as well. And lastly, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers put out another joint report, the one that's in the lower right. We're going to talk about some of these today. They do share some points in common. They may diverge in places. Again, we're all inventing this as we go along, and we're all trying to be as innovative as we can with the safety of all of the members of each of our organizations first in mind. You can negotiate rates, you can negotiate hours, you can negotiate all kinds of things. You can't negotiate something like COVID-19. It's nature, and you don't negotiate with nature. So all of us, paramount in our thinking is the safety of our members. Just one moment, I have to go back to my notes for a second. Now, next slide, please. I took this from the New York Times about 2 hours ago. Coronavirus deaths top 150,000 in the US. I said at the outset that we in New York had flattened the curve, that we had sent it packing, but that is relative. We did do that, we did succeed, but if we don't maintain our discipline as a region, that could go backwards. Of course, none of us wish the rest of the country to be going through what it is going through now, because that's what we went through several months ago. I noticed just yesterday that the federal coronavirus task force warned that 21 states warned them that they were in the red zone and they needed to take aggressive steps to slow the spread of the virus. That warning was given because those states are not doing that. And as all of us know, all of us are in this together, all of the states. Production just doesn't happen in Los Angeles County and the New York metropolitan area, obviously. It happens across the country. So if the rest of the country is not secure in terms of protection from getting infected by this virus, we're not secure either. So that's a concern. An example, analogous, is what happened to the Miami Marlins. 17 or more of their players and some of their staff suddenly were found to be positive. Well, that kind of reminded me of being on a set, with the keys and the actors and DP and direct, AD and all who's on the set. Imagine all of those people suddenly got sick. Well, that would tank a production. So actually, the way our productions operate, and I'm talking about, television, film, commercials, we all rely on each other. We work in close quarters. We cooperate closely with each other. You can't take out a big chunk of any production and have it continue. It's going to collapse. And of course, that means money. So we're all, none of us want the Major League Baseball to be an example of what could happen to us. Now, on a kind of slightly lighter note, back in March, I began to notice when COVID first entered the awareness of people working in media, that the first thing I noticed was the use of boom poles as social distancing devices. I noticed that a lot of them were held at about 6 feet to keep the person away. I'm being slightly lighthearted, but this was a real thing, and you see it to this day. When you're putting a wireless mic on somebody, that's pretty close contact. You're right next to that person. You're slipping a wire up under a blouse or a shirt or something. No, that's not going to happen. So that was just one example. And my comment here was that production, like Major League Baseball, is a contact sport. We are all close to each other, or at least we were, and we're used to being that way. Now, I've heard talk of some sets where actors or talent have asked the camera crew to back off, maybe because they had someone compromised at home and they didn't feel they wanted that kind of exposure. And if the camera crew backs off, what do they have to do? They have to put on a longer lens. So there's an example already of the COVID effect when it comes to production. Another one is an email I got from Tom Fletcher today, who represents Fujinon lenses. And he wrote that we're seeing shows that need to move fast, and to avoid lens changes, due to new cleaning requirements. So people are actually have expressed greater interest in what Fujinon is known for, which are their zooms, because that zoom on the left, that Fujinon zoom, can cover all but one of those lenses on the right. So imagine all those lens changes on the right versus not having to change the lens on the left, and you can see what the advantage is. Over on the cinematographer's mailing list, which is an international affiliated group of cinematographers, we've all been part of this for several decades. There's a big long thread right now about what's called non-obscuring face respirators. Now, I personally I don't think I would want this solution. I can't see me putting a big old mask over my face. I mean, I have that when I'm working on my apartment renovation, but I don't see me wearing that on a set. But people are so scared and so concerned, and they're grasping in so many directions. I just saw this as a symbol of where we are at the moment. Lastly, there is a lot of talk about vaccines. We're in a pre-vaccine interlude, if you will. As soon as a vaccine arrives, and I mean a vaccine that's proven effective, a vaccine that is 100%, and as soon as everyone is vaccinated, I think that the landscape can change again. However, I want you to look at this from the Financial Times from a couple of days ago. There are three companies. There's AstraZeneca, I'm going to forget one of them, Pfizer, and this company Moderna. And they're all going out for these big multi-billion-dollar contracts to, Operation Warp Speed, a vaccine to the American people. But there's a problem. You got to read the fine print. If you look at what I put in red, the NIH director said in red, having a vaccine by the end of 2020 was a stretch goal. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. And then Moderna's chief executive said the vaccine had a 75% chance of meeting the FDA's requirement of being 50% effective. What's 75% of 50%? I don't get this. And I just know in my bones that unless we have a vaccine, and until we have a vaccine that is bulletproof, we can't entrust our productions to that kind of nonsense. Now, there's a reason I feel so strongly about this. I myself was hit with COVID back in April for about 10 days. I was taken down. I wasn't in a hospital, but I had the aches and the pains, the slight fogginess, nasal infection, sore throat, lost my taste and my sense of smell. 10 or so days later, my taste buds got turned back on again. And I've been recovering since then. I'm okay. I feel like I've lost a little bit of strength. I don't feel like I have quite the stamina I had before. I don't want anybody who doesn't have to go through this to go through this. And that raises one last question that I'm going to ask a little bit later in this panel discussion, which is a person like me who can, I've been tested, I have the antibodies, a person like me who has the antibodies, where do we fit into this picture? I'm going to guess that we're going to be asked to be tested, and that's perfectly reasonable. But I'm still going to ask that question because as more and more people survive and have antibodies, and it's thought to be that they won't immediately be reinfected, well, we're like a third vector. Now, again, I just want to say one last time that today's discussion will be two-pronged. We want to address the path to resuming healthy production levels. We also want to discuss paths to ensuring safety and personal health among crew and production and facilities, staff, and everybody that's around production until a proven vaccine is readily available. And I underscore proven vaccine. With that, I'd like to ask Joe Reidy and Mary Ray Thewlis from the DGA to do a presentation on some of the chief takeaways from the white paper that was put out by the DGA, the Teamsters, SAG-AFTRA. Who am I leaving out? Anyway, yes, IATSE.
Right.
As in Local 600, forgive me.
Right.
Thank you, David. David,
Sure.
I'm sorry that you had COVID-19, and I hope that you have a full recovery at some point. And we should all reflect every day that 150,000 Americans have died and many more around the world. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who have been affected in America. And even though we've flattened the curve in New York and infection rate is down, people are getting sick still, getting infected and dying every day. And it's a highly infectious disease. And so as we are wanting to go back to work, and there's a lot of urgency behind it, we always have to remember every production decision we make could have impact on the lives of us, our crews, our actors, and as a result, our loved ones and everyone else's loved ones if they go home. And we've all heard the science. Everyone's heard this on the news. We know about who's symptomatic, who's asymptomatic, that some people are more vulnerable than others. But the bottom line is we're dealing with something extremely serious. So now the safe way forward began with for us, for Mary Ray and I, as a DGA committee from our national board. It's headed by Steven Soderbergh, and there are working DGA members on it, directors and production managers, assistant directors, and people from the live and tape television world who are directors, associate directors, and stage managers. And it's not a big group, but it's enough to cover all those jobs. We started meeting in April, and it was meant to cover both parts of the industry that we deal with, film as well as television. And parallel to that was the industry-wide Labor Management Safety Committee Task Force, big name. And they were the ones that published the white paper to the governors of California, New York, in terms of going back to work, June 1st. While they were meeting, the AMPTP met with the unions. This is where the DGA and the other unions started to collaborate on the safe way forward. Each union was doing their own work. In the case of SAG and the IA, they also had engaged their own experts, as we did, consultants. And so the idea of joining up with them to make one document to cover all of the unions came about as a result of the work done for those white papers going to California, New York. So that's like a direct result. We would have done our own plan, the DGA, but it made more sense that we collaborated with the unions. And we didn't mean to do detailed things for every person in every role, like to tell the camera department what to do, to tell the prop department specifically what to do, because each of those locals, each of those craft unions, et cetera, they're all going to do their own, and they're working on them. Some of them have already out, like 600 already has something out. And but the point is that we got together on the big points on how to get this moving forward. And again, everyone had consultants, very, very fine, high-level consultants on this. Steven Soderbergh had worked on the movie Contagion with Scott Z. Burns, who was the co-chair of the committee. And they were very, very familiar with the science and the what ifs. And it's a good movie to see someday. I wouldn't do it now because it would terrify you and you'd have nightmares, because it's true. A lot of it has come to pass, the truth. But the point is they're very familiar with it. So the idea of testing, this is the slide we're on now. Testing is the foundation of the system, of the safe way forward. This is the result of our experts, our consultants, and how to keep people safe. We have to assume that everyone's using social distancing. Everyone is wearing masks, PPE of all sorts as their job title needs. But the reason why we do testing, I'll describe in a moment. Okay, we'll get into the testing. So testing would be the foundation, a zone system in order to segregate people by zones in terms of level of importance and need to the production, and meaning importance in terms of near the actors, let's say. And then the people to help implement this program would be this health safety team. 2 individuals, hopefully, that are on every production. 1, a health safety supervisor. That's a medical person, someone with skills in public health or epidemiology or access to that. And a health safety manager, a production person who's totally focused on COVID-19 related production issues. So it's not part of the responsibility of the assistant directors or the stage manager in television or the unit production manager. So that they're focused on their job, it's hard enough, and that someone is just dealing with COVID related things. And these 2 people will keep everything sort of in line in terms of keeping us healthy. All right, and the next slide. Testing. All right, so why test? So temperature checks. Oh, I should back up for a second. A lot of other productions entities around the world, commercial companies abroad, unions abroad, like Beck2 in Great Britain, et cetera, they've done wonderful programs. They never mentioned testing, but they did a lot of things about how to clean your equipment and all that. Temperature checks seem to be the thing that that was a very familiar thing that people did. But we know this about the disease. You don't shed the disease for about 48 hours normally. You can walk around, you've been infected, but you don't show it. 48 hours, then you start to shed the disease. After that, then you start to show symptoms. So shedding is different from symptoms. So you're infectious, then you show symptoms. So the testing, and that usually ranges 5 to 8 days to start experiencing the symptoms. So like when you got the symptoms of COVID, David, you had been infected for a while. You had had it before you were able to show the symptoms. So it's that period of time before you show symptoms that we have to catch in testing as close as possible to the infection point. And we're trying to achieve a set or a production company that does not, it's not like you can't get infected, because you get infected if you go home and you meet somebody at the grocery store or restaurant, they infect you. But you're not going to get infected at work if we prevent people from who have an infection from being part of the work group. And that means we are preventing spreading of the disease. So this is the justification for testing, getting tested. Performers are the most vulnerable. When they're acting, they're not wearing PPE. They're like we are now on Zoom without a mask. They're acting just like it was before COVID hit. And the same goes with extras. They're not going to be walking around without protection. So we're supposed to protect them. This is where you have problems if you don't have protection from them, and the testing is to make sure that they're not exposed to people that could carry it. PPE is not enough. We'll show you when we get to the chart next. Temperature checks are inadequate in that if you're showing a temperature, either you don't have COVID and you have another illness, or you've just worked out, you've gotten angry or something like that and your temperature's gone up, or it's too late and you're now shedding the virus. You've already been shedding the virus, in which case anybody you've dealt with in production has been infected. So the modeling has showed that testing will help with this, but increased testing reduces the risk of acquiring infection on the set. Now let's change the slide. So now, I don't want to go too much in detail about this, and you can read it in the Safe Way Forward. Let's just talk about the infection rates right now. So the transmission rate in New York City today is 1.01. That's really good. Compared to Los Angeles County today, or the 7-day average, is 8.4, where they're having a huge surge. Or let's go to Miami-Dade County, where it was 12% today. So, you know, these are big, big differences. It shows you that New York is doing really well, but it also you can dial back to April when New York's transmission rate was very high. There was in the teens, you know, and in some ethnic groups it was much higher, you know, nearly 20%. So the charts are really better explained if you read the detailed version, but it is essentially taking a model of, take one of those squares, and on the left-hand side, the community RO, that's the R0, is the transmission rate. And on the bottom, the community infections rate. Infections rate, I'm not sure how to look that up locally, but let's say the New York testing positivity rate today is 0.9. So I'm thinking that's the same idea of infections, you know, like they're catching. So ours is very, very low. When our experts were using the modeling, they were doing community infections that were still within, you know, not outrageous amount down there on the bottom. That's the bottom of the rectangle. And the left-hand side, the transmission rate, right now, our New York is at 1, right? And LA is off this chart currently. It's way above what that would be listed on that chart currently. The point is that with the combination of these numbers, we can get at what is the likelihood of having an infection on your set. So on the right-hand column, those are a 30-day shoot with 100 people on set where you're imagining there's going to be 1 infection at the minimum. And the 1 infection then translates into a spread of how many people you're going to infect beyond that. You know, 1 is a problem. What if the Miami Marlins had caught the 1 player or the 1 person before 16 other people were infected and they had testing in place, but something slipped through, and it could have been not testing frequency could have been the problem. So as we do this chart here, from top to bottom, the top one is no testing, and the bottom is testing every day. So you can see that the blue shows the least chance of infection. Daily testing does that, shows least, because what are you doing when you find a tested person that's positive? You're isolating them. That means a lot in the world of employment, all right, which we're not going to get into here, and it's not in the safe way forward. That's to come in the industry. Someone tests positive, they have to be isolated. That means they have to go home. They may need to seek care. And they may have to be replaced on set or whatever that is. If you're a principal actor on a television show or a movie, you may have to take more serious steps, or the DP or the director. So this chart shows really more of the backup of why we test frequently. I'm moving on. So the next one, because we're going to get back to frequency of testing, the zone. All right, so the other principle of the safe way forward is why we have a zone system. You'll see pods mentioned in other documents and by other organizations. That's all fine. They can coexist with the zone system. Zone system is about testing. So a zone A is not just a physical place, it's a state of being. So I'm a principal actor, I'm the lead in the story, I'm tested 3 times a week. I am zone A. The people, and I'm wearing PPE all the time until I'm acting. The people around me that are closest to me, the hair and makeup people, the director, the script supervisor, the director of photography, the assistant camera people, the operator, the boom operator, the sound person that adjusts my radio mic. And we can expand it, the other actors, the extras that are close to me who are not wearing PPE. They all have to be tested too, as frequently. Someone working for the day is a different situation. We're talking about people that are around all the time. But clear to work is all that matters. So clearing to work is one thing, and people get tested, and they're tested a couple times. They're clear to work. They're fine for as long as a day, 2 days. Then it's time to test again, because that's the time where you could conceivably been infected, and before you shed the virus, you're caught. You're found. So zone A comprises those individuals. It's a space. It's the hot set when suddenly we have actors without PPE and the people around them are there. It is the makeup and hair trailer where the actor has to take off their mask to get the makeup put around. They have to have the mustache put on. Whatever it is, it's that's a zone A space with zone A people tested for zone A. Zone B is, it says here, everywhere else where there's a footprint on the set. That's the production office. The makeup, it's the trailers. It's the, until they have zone A people in it. It's hair and makeup, the wardrobe shop, the construction shop, the art department office, anywhere that is where actors are not expected to show up without their PPE. If an actor, a zone A person can go and can mingle with zone B as long as they're wearing PPE. So a director can wear a mask all the time. He can interact with somebody who's not tested as frequently as zone A, and same with the actors, as long as they're wearing PPE. So that covers the footprint. That covers people everywhere in the production. Zone C is the outside world. That's your own home. That's the hotel where you might be staying at, or you stop at a restaurant on the way. It's anywhere other than the environment of the production, the set, and its the footprint, the wider footprint. It could be a base camp or anything like that. That's zone C. Important to know because you're going to be mingling in zone C every day, and that's where you will end up getting infected. That's where the Miami Marlins got infected. You know, it's like, this is where it happens. So we say, for next slide, zone A 3 or more times a week. And what kind of tests are we talking about? So the PCR test, the nasopharyngeal test, that's the one that penetrates the nasal passage and tickles your brain. Everyone talks about. If they haven't done it, everyone's afraid of it. David, what kind did you have? Did you have a test?
I was only tested after the fact for antibodies.
Yes.
And by the way, now that you've raised that, I wore PPE in the weeks leading up to me being infected. I knew exactly where I was at all times. I took no chances. This thing is so stealthy that
Yes.
your emphasis on repeated testing is such an important point, because if I were in a production and I were being tested 3 times a week, someone would have caught it.
Well, that's true. And that's the point. So 3 or more times for zone A. Now, it would be great if everybody on the production was tested every day, everyone, from top to bottom, from the lowliest person on the set or on the production to the top. It costs a lot of money. Where do you get the tests? Especially with the pandemic raging around the country, where do you get them? Well, you can get them. You're already studios, I don't want to mention them specifically, but some of the majors and the networks are securing the ability to get tests. They're getting it. I don't know about independents. They have to do some work. They have to talk to their brother and sister line producers and find out where to get it. It can be done. Certainly in New York, you can get tests in a City MD or one of these places, or the health and hospitals through New York City. But you need to get them privatized for your production to get tests available, so you can do it on set during your workday, getting the results back within a timely fashion. You have to have your own lab. You have to do all that kind of work. And some of the majors and the networks are doing that already. It's 3 or more times a week for a portion of the crew and the cast. And you can test as many extras as you want. This might drive certain scripts to have fewer extras. That might, might change the nature of a lot of things in scripts to come, is possible. But we're not dealing with that. That is up to people to decide what they're going to do when they're creating their projects. Zone B, once a week. Okay, so that does catch infections. It does. It helps. It shows you on the graph like what once a week testing does, that there's more of a chance for an infection to slip through and not be caught. But the zone A people will not be affected if everyone is wearing PPE, because they should not be interacting with zone B people without PPE. So now the nasopharyngeal PCR test is the way to go. There is talk of combination with rapid testing. When we composed this, when we worked on this, rapid testing was not as available. It was also more expensive, harder to do. Now it's becoming more available. Some companies are going to buy the machines for rapid testing, where you could do 15 minutes to 45 minutes on set. or at your place of business, and that's possible. And so there could be eventually a combination of tests, of kinds of tests, like one of the PCR tests, that's the nasopharyngeal test, or a mid-nasal test. There's another one that's not as far back in the nasal cavity. And so that is all in the works. The science is developing. All right, next slide, please. All right, to implement this, we're saying that every show should have a health safety supervisor, a medical person, someone that's part of the production, department head, that is an authority figure. They talk to the producers. Here's a situation. They coordinate the testing, meaning the conducting of testing and the release of the results, which has to be done privately. There's laws that affect how test results are released and what you do with them. And so they have to monitor that. And that's, you know, all the legal aspects of that. They have to hire people to help. A set medic, currently movies and television shows in New York City have a set medic, or in LA, and one person's not enough for this. If you have a base camp, you have extras holding, you have, you know, a location here, people have to check in, which we'll get to when we talk about the health safety manager. Get your, undoubtedly, a mandated temperature check anyway, fill out a health assessment if you haven't done it online or on your smartphone on the way to work. You have to check in, get your ID checked, all that stuff. The health safety supervisor has to be in charge of this. If there's a breach in COVID-19 protocol, meaning people refuse to wear their masks, which we've heard about on some of these productions that have already gone in the works. You know, I'm not wearing a mask, I can't do my job. Well, they can't work. They can't work. They can't be part of the production. And we need a heavy to enforce that. It would be the health safety supervisor, which is to tell the UPM or the line producer, this particular crew member is not refuses to wear a mask. We have to isolate them. They can't do their job. And so they're working, so this person is working with the first assistant director, the other department heads, and is, you know, when I say supervising COVID compliance, that is the social distancing, the mask wearing, the hygiene, they're supervising it. They're not doing it. They're not ordering the hand sanitizer. They're not doing that. They're just making sure it's done. They're coming to the first assistant director and saying, everyone needs a break to wash their hands. They haven't been doing it. Or let's have a stop here right now and talk to everybody about a reminder about what they have to do. They would be part of the daily safety meeting that the first AD has to always remind people about COVID-related health issues on a daily basis. This is some of the things that they would do, and they could do more. But figuring they have a team, they're not just alone. They have people to help them administer tests, et cetera. Health safety. Again, a health safety manager is a production person. Logistics include setting up medical checkpoints. So a crew comes to work every day. They have an armband or a badge on a lanyard or something, and it says Zone B. I'm just saying an example because a production should tailor it to their needs. Zone B. There's been testing. Testing, let's say once a week, was on Tuesday. I'll make that up because the 3 days a week was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for Zone A. So let's say Tuesday was a Zone B. The health safety supervisor has seen all these results. Anybody who's tested positive has found out already. They know. The health safety supervisor knows. They're not coming to work. They're not at work. But if anyone has a symptom or they have to describe their health, they have to check in with somebody. And that would be part of the health safety team set up by the health safety supervisor. But the health safety manager has set up the physical space, tent, the office, the pop-up tent, the Winnebago, whatever it is. They've got something physical that they've set up. They've set up the hand washing stations, which are these portable things to wash your hands. You could put it anywhere near on a stage is ideal, could be on a location. Hand sanitizer, setting up places where you can easily sanitize your hands. Where the crew is going to disinfect any equipment. They're going to be done in the rental houses, but every day, equipment on the truck is being handled by lots of different people on the crew, and drivers and helpers on the truck. And just as a matter of course, there's going to be sanitation. So they're to help with the crew with that. If they need supplies, if they need anything with that, they provide it. They get it, they order it, they give it to them. And they need a team. So they would have a health safety unit PA assisting the manager. Go put the toilet paper in the bathroom and the paper towels. Let's get hand sanitizer, put it over here and here. And so they take care of all that. Ideally, there's a place where there's like a sally port or a place where a quarantine area where fresh equipment that's arrived or food or props, set dressing or anything that's new to a stage or a location comes in. It's not just camera equipment, it's other stuff that gets and is then sanitized. And that zone or that area has to be set up by the health safety manager. This is restricted area where equipment goes in, sanitized, then it goes to where it goes. And that can be anything that comes in, including food. That could be in a production office. It has that. Mail, deliveries, food, etc. goes in through that. And the health safety manager is working in prep to do that. PPE has to be distributed to the crew. The crew doesn't have to come in with their own stuff. They can if they want to, but we have to distribute it. So production has to provide it. And that could be vary. Gloves for some people who need them, although they're not considered the best thing for eliminating infection, but they are there if people need them because really hand washing and hand sanitizing is ideal. And face masks for people that need them. That's the face shields as well as masks. Beyond that, to be decided by the different unions and crafts. Security. How do we prevent people from going from one zone to another? Specifically, Zone C, the outside world. Who can go into the set? A visitor from the studio or the ad agency or a union rep or anybody else? Well, they can enter the Zone B. They have to be tested. They have to be tested before they go there. So that kind of security to make sure that no one brings their pal or or their spouse or anybody in. So that has to be a closed set, close to the outside. But not saying union reps, special guests of the cast or the agent or for the actor or the agency for a commercial. They have to be tested, or else they're vulnerable, but they're also could be bringing in infection. So security is tailored to your production, but the health safety manager should engage these people. They're not set PAs. They are people that just do security, and they don't have to be rent-a-cops. They should have be a little more savvy about production. This could be a PA that's now doing security but doesn't do PA work. But because everyone has to be focused on their COVID-related jobs. And there's more to that, obviously. So there's, ventilation as a consideration. So the UPM, the location manager, and the health safety manager are going to worry about ventilation. That's outside air coming in. Not a worry in many places, but stages and all that stuff, the people are worried about it and concerned about it. And I'm sure Alan's been working on that in his stage, and there's been a big discussion. But we're not always on a stage. We're in a local location where we have to be able to open up a window. So health safety manager has to be on top of all that. So now, next slide, please. Health safety in general. I just mentioned ventilation. There you go. COVID safety training. So the health safety supervisor needs to be trained. They need to have certain criteria where we hire them. That's being crafted now. Starting with someone who's got a medical background, but COVID related, they have to meet certain criteria. That's yet to be established. I mean, officially. People are hiring health safety supervisors now. They're being approved by the unions, and all that. That's all good. But that's separate from this kind of safety training and that COVID safety training that crew members will get. Contract Services, CSATF, is developing training that will be administered to all crew in prep, hopefully before they start working, that they would do sort of like the sexual harassment training or safety training that they already get. so that they'd be able to take COVID-related training, and that there would be briefings done and prepped by the health safety supervisor to people in the office and the shops, and then as part of the daily safety meetings with the first AD when we talk about set operations, and then also COVID-19 related stuff. PPE we talked about, physical distancing. All right, so physical distancing is how you set up your offices, how you set up, how I run the set as a first AD. And we can talk about now pods for a second for physical distancing. So in order to keep physical distancing viable on a set, we can't overcrowd it. So naturally, there's a rehearsal, the actors leave, it's send all the technicians in, everybody all at once. Well, big space, maybe it can work out and you have everybody go in all at once. Small space, not possible. So the AD, working with the department heads, the technicians, will work out a system of who goes taking turns, alternating their time in there. When they're, if we adhere to a pod system, which some companies are going to ask us to do, that's beyond the zone system. That's like keeping the grips in a pod, keeping the electricians in a pod, letting them work as a pod or a combination of grip and electric as a pod. And then when they're done doing their work, they go to an area where they don't mingle with other people in other crews. Good luck with that, I say to everybody, but that's what is probably going to be needed. And the reason is when we get into infections and contact tracing. So physical distancing becomes one aspect, working in pods, not mentioned here, but is another aspect. So you're taking turns and not overcrowding. When anybody, the COVID safety, the health safety supervisor or the ADs see a huddle of people gathering, talking about anything, we're going to break it up. Can't do it. You have to find another way when you're in the physical space to talk. Separate yourselves, still have the conversation. If you have something private to say, you better text them because you can't really interact so closely with people. You always have to maintain the physical distancing, even with the testing, even with all that. So pod system, you're going to tailor it to your productions. But the idea is that people go to their area and stay in their area, stay with their group all the time, their meals, etc. It's going to be really hard to do. It's really hard. Yes.
Joe, there's so much specificity here. How will people understand what's expected of them?
I think the broad strokes are the important thing, and people have to tailor it. And we're having workshops for ADs and UPMs, and I'm supposing that the other unions are doing the same thing for them to help them along with it. So they get into the details. So I don't think I should go beyond. This is a lot of information now.
Yeah, there's a restaurant association in Union Square that has also put out a white paper for restaurant workers, and they're going to require that the workers take tests before they're hired on their understanding of the new rules, just to make sure they understand, because there's so many little fine points here. Mary Ray, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, I was going to jump in a little later because Joe is laying the groundwork and it's so thorough, it's so wonderful. But one of the most important things to take away from this, I think, is you have to make this your own. You have to take this, you have to read it, you have to understand it, and then you have to tailor it to your production, to your crew, to whatever. I mean, there's going to be, I've gotten so many questions like, well, my executive producer is not on the list to come on set. Okay. Well, he probably wants to come on set, or she. They probably need to come on set, but they have to be tested. So I think this is all, it's a lot to digest. I understand that, but I also think it's important to tailor it to what works for you and your show.
Yeah, it sure seems predicated on having affordable tests readily available.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
I can finish this up and we can get into a discussion.
Okay.
Let me just plow through. So beyond physical distancing, we talk about security, except the general public when you're shooting out on the street. We don't know how this is going to work in the city of New York on the streets. but we have to find a way where the general public does not filter into your set. You're going to have people on the perimeter that are talking to the general public who could be carriers. And those people we care about, those people that are holding parking PAs, holding parking spots for the trucks. We're having PAs holding traffic, holding pedestrians. These people are vulnerable and they'll be tested. But we have to find ways that we work with the cities and localities where we can really secure our areas so that there's no infiltrating of people that come out, hey, well, I want to take a picture of this actor, and they walk right up. A paparazzi, anybody like coming into our core area. Shorter shooting hours, we just recommend a shorter day, whatever that means. French hours, a 10-hour day, it's really about low infection rates. During that time, how are we doing the testing? Testing should be done during the workday, not after work, not before work. You can find a way, if you do it during prep and get everybody tested, they can start day one by bringing their equipment into the set without having to be tested. But when it's their scheduled test day, they're getting tested on their time down during the day. And everybody has time down. Just like you go to the restroom, the DP has time to go get tested. The principal actor has time to go get tested. So that's when you do it. You don't do it as a beginning of the day and waiting in line, everybody all at once. That's not a smart way of doing things, nor is it smart to do it at the end of the day all at once. It's better to do it spread out during the day, you do it. But if you don't do it, you have to do it before you leave on your test day. Let's move on to pre-production. So a producer should hire a health safety supervisor right away. We should try to do remote work as much as possible. Work, do Zooms, do all that stuff, have less interaction. Get your office set up with a lot of space between desks. Go paperless. We're already doing it now, but as much as possible. And people are already, the productions and accounting firms and all this stuff are getting ready to go paperless. They've been working on it for years, but now it's going to be a full-on paperless thing. Physical distancing, we talked about, sometimes it's not possible. Two people in the shop have to work closely together, just like two people on a set have to work closely together. That's why we wear PPE. It's really as much as you can do. That's all, as much as you can do. Get a lot of room, ventilation everywhere in all these spaces. Testing regimen starts in prep. You're going on a location scout and all this stuff. People going to see locations. You're traveling in Zone C. You're going into somebody's home. You're going into a public building. You're out on the street looking at locations. Your main people have to get tested. Your working crew have to be tested. Where you decide to test multiple times, you have to decide for yourselves on each production, because you certainly by production have to be into the A, B, C zone system. In prep, really by the time the actors begin, because they're not wearing PPE. But I do worry about director and DP and scouting times, going to look at our production designer. But they should be tested so that they could isolate if they get sick. Once a week, I can't say what. It's more like to be determined by your production because of the cost. Production, and we've covered a lot of this already. All the zone system testing, schedule, et cetera. We recommend Monday, Wednesday, Friday for Zone A, Tuesday for Zone B, as an example. Your health and safety team are helping to deal with hygiene, sanitation, PPE, physical distancing, food and snacks, catering. No more buffets, everything covered up. No more no elaborate craft service exposed to the air out on the street where you have dips and chips and everything else and fruit salad bowls and everything all open. That's over. Now it's covered snacks, packaged things handed to you. So you're not like sticking your hand into the M&M bowl or reaching into the cooler to grab the Coke. Someone's got to be there to give you everything wrapped and safe, so you know it's not infected. And also it's also embarrassing to have that in the general public too, just by the way, especially as people are having a harder time finding something to eat in our world. Transportation, the Teamsters are developing their own protocols, but we know that it's going to involve physical distancing in crew vans and people movers and that kind of thing, and whether people drive to work or not and how they do that. Exposure to the outside world, we covered that with the people that are working in the outside world a little bit. They got to be tested. Parking PAs, shoppers for the costume department, the production design, set decorating, etc. All of that. Because we changed the slide again for after work, we're getting into the same thing for everybody. You have to follow safe practices. Even with, I just went out on the street to walk my dog. There's still a percentage of people in New York that are not wearing masks in certain places. I don't get it. They don't read the newspaper. Yeah. Or watch television, watch the news, I guess. So you have to follow safe practices. Now, in conclusion, the last slide, this is not a static document, meaning people are going to go back to work. They're going to find better ways. They're going to find the right way. They're going to find something that's tailored to them, as Mary Ray said, but also we're going to find from experience what might work better. And we're going to improve it. We're going to revisit this as time goes on. And lastly, the DGA and the unions are in negotiations with the AMPTP about this, to codify this, to make it more real than just the safe way forward, which is guidelines and recommendations. We want something that's enforceable, and we'll cover a lot of other issues. So that's in the works. I can't give you a timeline, but there you go. That's the safe way forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Mary Ray. Hey, Dejan, you're on a camera department. Okay. You're a DP.
Joe, thank you so much for a very granular, very detailed presentation. And it encompasses I can count to my count 5 papers of recommendations that have been made, and the safe way forward in local 600s and PERG, and now we have MOM, which is the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, as well as the state. I think what's really important right now is what's the reality of the COVID onset structure, and you did mention here right at the end. These are all being presented as recommendations that what the multi-guild unions have been working on and presenting now to the AMPTP. It's all has to be agreed by the studios and by those who are representing those producers, which is still ongoing right now.
It's nice that we have some solidarity.
Absolutely.
All these people, which is, it's an amazing thing to have actors, technicians, directors all together on this, and drivers, everybody. It's pretty terrific.
And I agree with you. And as far as, the testing, working with the, actually we had a member wrote his diary and recently, and I don't know if you had a chance to read one of his, and he said he's being tested 8 times the week in that group A. And actually the testing started in pre-production with and then it went on being tested twice a day for those who were in Group A. I think the issue here now is what I'm interested in is, the practical reality of our recommendations. And you're right, it's evolving. It's going to be a learning process for all of us. It's going to be a different set, how we're going to be working with one another with the different pods, what's the communication, how that's going to work. It's going to involve longer hours because 10 hours is our goal, in actual production, but then to actually go through training and safety and all the protocols and have one pod work separately at one at a time, who could be on the set, who can't be. And then everyone wants to be monitored. It's interesting for the stages, the monitoring aspect of it. I see, actually this time I can really defend wholeheartedly having DITs, digital imaging technicians on set, because we're gonna have a hell of a lot more monitoring because everybody wants to know what's going on set A. And so that's going to be a really important issue, you know, how we're going to work that. And then that plays into, and I'm glad that we have a representative, Alan, that you're here soon, Suna, is it? Yeah, that you're here for the stages, is the capacity for you know, do we have the capacity in our stages to allow for all this monitoring of new RF? Because that also involves the electric department too, as well, you know, now that we're using iPads, you know, for dimmer systems, et cetera. So, I mean, it's going to be a real different look, you know, how, you know, our set's going to be working with the zone system or the pod system. And I think what intrigues me is, you know, what that template, what's going to be that template. Hopefully we can get to a uniform template, you know, that can be used. You're right, Mary, that, you know, there's going to be different requirements, because right now we do have, we have commercials are the ones that are kind of the guinea pigs have been out there now for a shoot day here, 2 days there. But frankly, and just feeling out my colleagues, you know, other DPs right now, they're either been pushed. The reality here for New York has been pushed into either the soonest will be a sitcom situation, you know, here in New York, which is more controllable. It's all on sets, you know, and there's definitely physical distancing, you know, with the cameras, 4 cameras for that. But then the productions have been pushed into either late August or at the earliest in September. So, you know, it's just intriguing, you know, just how we're going to, this organism is going to work, you know, what's going to be the, I call the template, you know, that's going to be in reality working. I got a big kick out of getting the comment from the mayor's office, you know, as far as you can have 2 cameras and 3 stands, you know, on exterior shoots, you know. Well, that's a new one, you know, that's, so there, right there again, I have DPs asking me, am I going to be forced to do a COVID version that's going to, you know, affect my aesthetics here? You know, so there's a lot of questions. There's also questions, you know, you brought up, it was brought up about the Marlins situation. What the hell happens if there's, you know, that we do, and it will happen, that there'll be someone who is infected or has it, or maybe not just 1, but 2 in a particular department. What's going to happen with that group? Are they going to be replaced? I don't think no one knows the answer to that at this particular moment. So there's a lot of, these are a lot of, you know, very real questions, you know, that, you know, that need to be answered. And again, I wish I had a crystal ball. I can look downfield to see, you know, what's going to be that machine. But to credit all the guilds and to having put together at least the hard work that went in the last 3 months to come up with a process and a system.
Hey, Alan, what does it look like from your vantage point as someone who runs a studio space?
Well, there are certain basic things that are we do or have done. You know, and I'll tell you about some of them, all of which, you know, make a lot of sense. But the thing that is missing, I think, in this entire presentation is, you know, if you're working a 10-hour day, a 12-hour day, whatever it may be, everyone has a life, and they go away from the set and they go wherever they're going. And, you know, the level of discipline that they may have in those places may be very, very different. I mean, as a producer, you know, a friend of mine who's watching this right now, you know, who pointed out, you know, we have great discipline on set. It's when they go home is, you know, when we have the problem. And so I think that, you know, testing is important. I do think I'm going to tell you what we're doing that's positive, but also there's a problem with the DGA white paper. And the problem with the DGA white paper is that it, in my opinion, and even a lot of this presentation, it scares a lot of people because it doesn't have definitive information. We don't have scientists that are knowledgeable about production on this panel. You know, I understand Russ Hollander feels that he hired a lot of people that are experts and what have you, but the way in which it's been disseminated, it just reminds me of when you just scare a lot of people. So on that note, I will say the things that we are doing and other facilities are doing. We have installed hand washing stations all over the place. We have changed every filter that we have in all of our air conditioning systems to MERV 13, which is the new standard for doing these kinds of things. You will find that there are certain experts that have come in to say, wait a second, that's not really good enough. You need to have 100% fresh air. Okay, now that seems sensible. Now you can do that. It's really not that hard, but it means you give up something very important on the set, which is called air conditioning. You know, we have exhaust fans. You can open the elephant doors and what have you. You can pull all the air through. You can have 100% fresh air all day long. But all air conditioning systems are set up so that you are recirculating a certain amount of air. And again, you know, that we have hand sanitizer probably every 6 inches wherever you're walking around. Our clients are setting up testing. Testing is probably the most significant thing that you can do. And we're working with them to set up areas in which testing can take place. When I walked into the studio yesterday, there was a lineup, which I think goes to, I think David or Joe made the point earlier, but you can't have testing every single morning before people show up. This is one of the shows that's going to be starting construction. And so they're ready to start construction, but they had to basically start people testing. And it was like a big queue. So there are a lot of things that are being done, but it really goes to, I don't know who said it earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of personal responsibility, people wearing masks, wearing PPE. And I will tell you one last thing, and then I will be quiet because you don't have that much time left. I'm on the board of one of the major New York hospitals, and the one actually that got hit probably with COVID cases more than anybody else. And the fact of the matter is that the staff in the hospitals wore PPE, and they're surrounded by COVID all the time. The incidence of the hospital staff being infected by COVID was so much lower than the general public. And it just talks about you have to keep discipline on your set, and you have to keep discipline when you go home. And if people do that, I think that we are, you know, we have the chance of being in a much safer environment. And like David, I had COVID-19 back in early March. And how did I get it? It wasn't very complicated. I was on a ski trip in Vail, Colorado with 130 people. Everybody's in gondolas together, you're eating together, you're hugging, you're all people hadn't seen one another in a long time. This is not the type of behavior that we should have on set. Okay, half the people on that trip came down with COVID-19. No one was hospitalized. So just saying, we just have to be sensible and we just have to be disciplined as individuals.
David, this is John. We have a quick question that might be a good one to put in right now from Michael Moser. And he would like to know, has the way forward actually been implemented on any production so far, and how well is it working?
Mary Ray, do you know the answer?
Well, because we're still in negotiations, I don't think it's officially implemented on anything, honestly. But I know that there are a number of productions that have gone to the DGA and presented a health plan that they wanted to shoot with, and we're okayed to do it. But in terms of an official thing, no, because not until the negotiations finish.
Yeah, and as far as Local 600 is concerned, is that unless the guidelines of that, the Local 600's principles and key recommendations relate to, unless if they need to be followed, otherwise we're not allowing our members to go to that stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matt Miller, you represent producers, people that edit commercials, producers of commercials, post commercials. What's your world like right now? I think you're, yeah, thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm up now. I feel unqualified because I'm the only one to not have COVID to speak right now. Our people are working, which is great news. You know, we do have guidelines that we wrote way back in the end of April, anticipating people getting up and working and commercials being the first up. And the only set of guidelines that you mentioned that are actually in effect right now, and actually, you know, multitudes of companies and productions happening under those guidelines. I think the one thing that's important, and I won't speak to the other documents because they're clearly written for long form and motion picture and television production, but ours are not predicated on testing. Ours are predicated on safe environments. And, you know, we wrote them with a scenario in mind, if you can imagine this. You have a crew of 15 people, and you assume that 14 of them are infected. How are you going to make sure you leave that day with that one person not infected, right? It's about keeping your germs in, PPE, being diligent about sanitizing areas, doing all those things, social distancing, doing everything, right? They say wear PPE if you can't social distance. No, wear PPE and social distance, right? And wash your hands and use hand sanitizer and sanitize equipment and do this and do that. Our guidelines are very specific about the protocols to follow. And in doing so, have been very successful. Commercials do not have the time to do testing as it's technologically available today. And it's not practical to even talk about testing when the job, someone will be tested on the day that they're hired, that they're engaged, and the job will be over before they even get the results back. The average commercial is a day and a half. So we have to be more diligent about protecting the environment, protecting the people in the environment, than relying on a testing environment where, you know, people may or may not actually get those results back and know which way they go. And, you know, when you are safe and you are following those protocols, there's no factor in it not working. There's no 80%, 90%, 92%. It's 100%. And we know that. Anyone read the article in the New York Times last week about the hair salon, right? Two people in the hair salon that worked there, cut hair, had COVID. They wore PPE all the time. Not a single one of their clientele contracted COVID. They went in the back room. They all relaxed to drink coffee. They took their masks off. The other people in the salon got COVID, right? If you don't understand it, understand that, right? Because that speaks volumes about exactly what's going on here. And we know exactly how that works. So it's very important, the diligence of the crew. Yes, our guidelines talk about what is on the producer and all of the keys and everyone looking over their departments to look for and require, but it's on every individual. Everybody's got to be a grown-up here, right? You can't have cops that have to go around and wear masks. If someone's dumb enough to not wear a mask, they shouldn't be working. And I think, you know, this is grown-up time for everyone. So I think that's what our papers are dedicated on. You can certainly read them on our website. We've had 5 versions of them. We've distributed every one of them to the governors of the major states with production centers from the first version that was up in late April to the last version that was actually published in late May. And a 6th version is being worked on now as we continue to learn more and have more experience. And it's just important that we all be diligent. We all want safe environments. We all want no one to be sick. We all want to be working. And we all have to take that responsibility upon ourselves.
Matt, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw out, I'm trying to weed, we're getting a lot of questions, and some of them I think.
John, if you don't mind, I want to get on to Andy and Pete. Let's hold the Q&A until we do a Q&A session. I've often thought that rental houses have a unique overview of what's going on because you guys know what's going out, you know who, you know, what's being produced, both union crews and independent, non-union and such. And I'd like both of you to speak to how you see the reopening of production in the New York City area. And also, it's going to be your responsibility to sanitize equipment as it's returned, as it goes back out. Equip cameras, trucks, everything that you rent and send out. Pete, you at AbelCine, and Andy, you at ARRI Rental, both have similar responsibilities along those lines. Can you speak to both of those things? Your sanitation of the equipment and also your overview, your sense of what's going on right now in terms of the reopening. Go ahead, Pete.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
maybe one of the things I can add here is that, you know, we have been open as an essential business after a very brief lockdown at the end of March. But we reopened in the first week of April. Now we have offices in really facilities in LA and New York. So we're just talking about those two facilities. But we reopened in early April with a skeleton crew and putting together our best practices, which of course with the PERG group coming together and that quick mobilization, and I think, Joe, you said it earlier, this idea of solidarity between service providers allowed companies like us to get online quicker and safer than had it been, let's say we were on our own and everyone else sort of finding their own way. But one of the things I want to bring up about that is that that means that for 4 months now, our company has been operating, albeit with a skeleton crew, most of the staff, and most service providers still have employees on furlough. We have to remember that. Or we have a lot of employees working at reduced pay. We'd never forget that. But the important thing, I think, for this group is that in a 4-month period of time, not only did we collectively learn about best practices, what's working best, but we see how the company works, how we interact with our client base. And one thing what we notice is that even though it seems so foreign to what we've ever done before, we're seeing at our facilities that our teams and our customers can get used to anything. And over time, we improve the protocols, we learn, and the practices become rote instead of something that we have people not wanting to do. So that's, I think, an important point to make. The second one, and of course, our practices in terms of safety and cleanliness and process and how many people we can put in what area of the company between rental and integration and fulfillment and other areas. We're slowly moving to a phased approach. We're moving to a new phase in August as a company. But the second thing I want to mention is that, and Andy could talk to this as well, we've been focusing as well on the creatives evolution, on how to keep creating from the early stage of the pandemic to where we are today. And I think it's important to touch on it, at least for a few minutes, that if we think about April and May, and creatives still had to, whether they're news organizations or content that had to get out, find new ways to produce compelling content. We went from, live stream, home production models to much more refined remote control cinema systems in which you can have safe sets, but you can have more folks that are normally on set participating in production remotely. And so we've spent a lot of our time in the early months, April, May, establishing and devising remote production solutions that were effective. And now as we move into a new phase, and Joe really covered this extremely well, we're looking at, as episodic comes online, what is a video village going to look like? Who really needs to be in that close proximity? What happens for the second layer of the video village, the script supervisors and the hair and makeup and everyone else? We're now at the point where we're starting to talk to productions about having remote monitoring capabilities for that group so that they're not necessarily in the video village, but they're somewhat still involved in the production, but it helps create that zone system as well. And of course, you brought up earlier, executives that come to set. Well, I think the practice going forward will be more and more that the executives will be remote in terms of their participation in a production. And most of the discussions we've been having the last 2 to 3 weeks have been devising systems where we have almost this onion, who needs to be in the middle, who needs to be on the next level, and which parts of the production that are innately and connected to the everyday production are actually working from their home office or their home. And maybe, Andy, you could speak about the balance between, technology innovation that we both, and we all need to do on the camera side, but also the question that Dave asked about protocol.
Yeah, along with the PERG policy, to echo what you said earlier, it was a big moment for us to be able to participate in that and add to it as a team effort. I think it was a really unique experience having folks from Abel and ARRI Rental and Panavision and TCS and Kesla all together talking about what we can do to do the right thing to create that safe environment. And I think our policies are along what Matt was speaking about, really creating a safe bubble. I mean, listening to all this conversation here, you realize just how much less control there is in actual production environment compared to our rental bubble. We can create that bubble, and inside that bubble, our employees can be safe, and we invite people in to participate. And that's what we're doing. We're allowing people in, and when gear comes in, we clean it very, very thoroughly. We're, obviously the science is sort of pointed to transmission through surface is less concerning, but we still do those. We set those policies up to obviously to thoroughly clean it with material, with the chemicals that do not damage the equipment. This is a very expensive process, but we've taken it upon ourselves to do that and actually label things as sanitized so we know they're good to go. So when things leave our bubble, they're clean, right? That's kind of what we've established in a rental house because we can't control that scenario. We cannot control exactly the people coming in. So when they do come in the building, we assume, they could have COVID. And so they're wearing PPE, we're social distancing, just like Matt said. So that's what we can do to control it. We're firmly in zone C, understandably. But we want people to be able to come in and out of our facility. And we set it up so that we can keep a very safe environment for anyone coming in. And that's what we can do for our employees and for our customers, and they're hand in hand, right? They're working close together. Well, 6 feet apart, but close together. So it's a super high priority, obviously, for us all. So the policy, the procedures are very much what you would probably have seen, fogging and alcohol and safe procedures, all to clean that equipment. In terms of, that it's been very effective, and we haven't had any cases directly related to that. But we haven't had any really thorough testing of our employees, just to be honest. We can't control that scenario. In the 5-day turnaround, 7-day turnaround that you can get for most testing isn't effective if you have employees in your building the whole time, So it just doesn't work, unfortunately, right now. There's a reality of that. We have to, when we were productions, though, they have done that with us in the parking lot. We set up spaces for them to operate, or any place that we can, just like we heard from others. So that's been effective, but obviously, again, we assume in the building that they're, sick, essentially. We treat them as such, as being people that could have it, the temperature taking, there's health declarations, but they all only go so far. We're doing all those things. We all have to do those things, but understandably, it doesn't go that far. I could also just talk briefly about what you asked, David, about, the state of things, and right. I will say, what we're hearing, and we do hear a lot from a lot of different sources, obviously all over, but, in the Northeast anyway, and in Canada, it's kind of the two areas that we see the best is return to production. Commercials are here now, and Matt's aware of those. Commercials are happening, not huge quantity, but a return to episodic production in September. It seems very, it's happening, that's the word on the street, and we're hearing that directly with equipment lists and requests. So, I feel very confident in late August, September return from major episodics in the city, which is great news.
Yeah,
how they're going to do it, I have no idea. But in our bubble, we can guarantee they don't get it from us.
Pete, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, that timeline is the same thing that we're seeing. Commercial and documentary work started earlier, maybe June. We started to see some signs of life, and in this month as well. But it's exactly what Andy said. The discussions about episodic are really starting up now, and bookings are starting, and really we're looking at mostly early September, maybe late August, early September.
Yeah.
Pete,
seems very really real ones. Yeah.
Pete and Andy, what exactly are you doing to sanitize the cameras? They're pretty fragile, expensive pieces of equipment.
Yeah. Well, there's some guidelines. Even my company that I work at, the parent company, has hard time recommending specific things to clean with, because obviously it's a bunch of liabilities, what we recommend, but we generally use, depending on what the surface is, ethanol, alcohol of a certain percentage. Now you can't use it on monitors, you can't use it on every part of that, but alcohol and other, that's for camera equipment, because we can control that and it's controllable. But for lighting equipment, we can use a variety of sort of sanitization, Lysol kind of type of products that we can spray on things. So that would that's kind of the line. It's the camera equipment, we're hand cleaning it with sort of alcohol solutions outside of ones we can't clean with that. And then sort of generically speaking, Lysol, Clorox type products for anything that can be essentially sprayed down,
Yeah, and if there's any further information, we're following the same protocols. If there's any further information you guys need that's not in the PERG guide and anyone wants recommendations, we're happy to share our internal practices with anybody.
Alan, at Silvercup, do you have an increased budget for cleaning?
I have to laugh at the word budget. We've hired more staff. We've purchased all kinds of cleaning supplies. Bathrooms are completely sanitized 3-4 times a day. You're only allowed 2 people in a bathroom. There's a limited number of people allowed in elevators. We're doing all the cleaning that both Pete and Andy are talking about in our equipment. We're just doing it all. And I guess we'll worry about the cost a little bit later. There's a certain amount you just have to do as part of all of this, and you just do it. So budget, no, we didn't budget it for it.
Well, everything costs. And in this entire discussion, of course, every producer that's listening in, and myself as well, we're all thinking about the cost.
Yeah.
And we could have another 2-hour discussion about that topic alone. But
Well,
all of this comes with yes.
I was
Mary
going to
Ray?
say, I think Pete and Andy were very accurate in, speaking about that. It appears that production will start shooting sometime in September. That's the sense we're getting from all of our clients. As many of you know, we do many television shows simultaneously. And so for us, we are doing all the steps. Frankly, even though I was taking a little jab at the white paper, we're doing all the things that largely are asked for in there. There were things that were, and I don't remember if it was in the white paper, but a recommendation that we didn't do because we vetted it with our clients is putting these specialized UV filters in the air conditioning system. They have no proven efficacy at all. But for a while, that's why I was getting a little passionate. They were scaring people that they have to do these things. They had to do these ionization things. There's all kinds of stuff which people speculated about, but there was no science or information behind it. And I think, Matt, I really felt was spot on when he was talking about the discipline that each of us have our own responsibility to do when onset and offset. And I can't emphasize that enough. I think it's more important than anything else that's been said here.
Mm. John, do you have some questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'd like to pull a couple of them together because they kind of work. I mean, I want to try to hope the people who ask these questions don't mind if I push them together. But these kind of relate to each other. People are concerned in the questions about, well, who's qualified to actually do this work on set? Do they have to be somebody with some kind of medical credentials? And then they're also concerned, and I think one of the people who asked this question must be a producer. They said, well, who's going to pay for all this? So that puts together about 3 different questions, but yeah, who's going to pay for the additional expenses and who's going to be the staff member you bring in? Anyone want to take a?
Yeah. So I think the industry, at least in the feature films and television, they're aware of budget issues on that level, that they're aware of it already. They want to go back to work. They want their product. They're already planning to expand budgets just to cover COVID-related things. There's a future where they see that that's not going to be forever, so that those extra expenditures will end for everything. That we might learn some good habits that we want to retain for when the virus is really defeated. But no, they're going to budget for that. In terms of the qualifications for the health and safety person, I mentioned earlier that's being developed. It's part of the negotiations, is establishing the criteria. But we know that it has to be someone who's versed in medicine. It's not just a person. It has to be someone with a medical background. What that is, could it be an RN? Could it be a already existing set medic? Possibly, but they have to at least get some extra training. But more likely it's going to be a little bit more advanced. As long as people aren't busy trying to cure people of COVID and they need a job, they're going to find it in the film industry for sure. So that's I think there's a future for that. Mary Gray, do you think you agree with this?
No, I do agree. And I think we're certainly beginning to see some people getting into that position or shaping themselves into that position. The health service manager is a little bit trickier in a way. It's an organizational managerial position, but it's important too. But I do think some medics will step up and include that in their responsibilities. And others will be just healthcare professionals. I think it's definitely in the works.
Has anyone figured out how to add a line item to the budget? Has that happened?
Anecdotally, I think many producers are kind of, I don't know what the figure is, but I want to say maybe 15%, but they're putting aside, an a certain percentage to take care of the COVID responsibilities.
There's a separate group of producers in New York. They have their own acronym, the New York Producers COVID Response Alliance, the NYPCRA. And it's a lot of people that cover a lot of the series television, independent features, major features. Not everyone is on it, but they did their own guidelines. They steered some things toward the white paper, the one that went to the governors. And they're all aware this is going to cost, all of these line producers. And they all talk to their superiors at Netflix, Amazon, CBS, Paramount, wherever. They're on that. So everyone knows it's going to cost for the time being.
The bottom line is there's really no choice because you're playing around with people's health.
Right.
If you don't do everything possible.
Either you do that or you're going to be skimming the bottom of the barrel on Netflix in a year from now to see the thing that you didn't see. And that'll be it.
And you don't want your crew to become the Miami Marlins, to take out a whole chunk of crew all at once. Yeah, yes, Pete.
I just want to bring up one point related to budget. My feeling is, yes, if there is if the studios are acknowledging that there needs to be budget to cover the COVID crisis, I am an optimist. I've always have been. I do think, though, that when it comes down to brass tacks and a budget is a budget is a budget, well, then production will find a way to have as high production value as possible within the budget. And this is where I feel collaborative tools, innovations in the production chain, innovations in technology, this idea that, usually disruptive technology is called that because it disrupts the norm, right? And that's why some technologies take hold and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they take a generation. Well, we're in a state that technology, the disruption, this is the most disruption that we've ever had in our business. Not only that, but it's affecting everyone in every piece of the business. So when it comes down to budget, my hypothesis or prediction is when we come out of this, there will be ways that we collaborate, ways that production works, that take what is now innovation and become the norm. And I do believe that that's ways that studios can control budget by adopting the technology that's enabling them to do it. I mean, Dave, how many SMPTE events did we have in New York over the years? Many. How many of them have we had 300 people? I wish we can get 300 individuals within, physically in a SMPTE session. They're usually well attended, but not 300. And how focused is this panel? I do believe collaborative technologies like Teams, Zoom, Frame.io, other tools where production can collaborate effectively. It's already happening in post. I believe that that becomes the norm as we come out of this.
This
So
was
that's the way to control budget, in my opinion.
Yeah, this was a theme at the HPA panel discussion earlier today in Los Angeles. They talked about exactly the same thing, you know, using wireless displays, tablets so you break up the video village. It's a thing of the past. There are efficiencies to be discovered in the process of doing that. So just in the same way that this pause in our economy has forced many of us to learn how to use things like Zoom, to create a meeting like this where each one of us at this meeting is at a remote place, far more convenient for each of us, I'm sure, and more comfortable, I'm guessing, as well.
You know,
I can sit and drink my coffee and we can have this panel discussion.
David, I'm responding to two things. Peter, you mentioned about remotes and, you know, and I mentioned earlier about how our set's going to change somewhat, you know, in a COVID environment. And I'm thinking specifically in remote asset management, you know, on set, near set, complete remote color, remote camera control, streaming. And you know, like I said, we need to communicate to a lot of different entities, but in a socially distant and safe way. And that's going to force us to change and discover new ways of doing things, you know, on set. So that's why, Alan, I threw it back to you as far as, you know, is there a need, I would say, to expand the bandwidth, because now I'm dealing also with the electrical department that have their requirements, you know, with the new LED, with what we've been working now with dimmers and new systems, et cetera, that in other words, it's demanding a lot more bandwidth. And frankly, I think it's something the stages have to deal with in order to accommodate these changes.
You mean literal bandwidth?
Yeah, literal
network pipeline. Yeah, a big pipe.
Exactly, the pipe.
Putting out all the live stream out the door. Yeah, it's going to be essential.
I'm just responding from what the DITs have been talking to me about. You know.
Yeah, that's what they're going to offer. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to actually address that in a slightly different way.
Sure.
You know, we had that movie or series of movies with Michael J. Fox way back when called Back to the Future. And what we're finding with a number of our clients is they are going to be limiting the amount of location work that they're doing, and they're going to be building more scenery.
Right.
And that it gives them the controlled environment. It allows them to be in that disciplined place that they need to be, as opposed to out on the streets. And so I think, and that's going to really have a very big impact, I believe, on the showrunners, executive producers, writers, and what have you, to rethink how they are scripting these dramatic series.
Exactly.
I mean, we're not going back to the days of Lucy and Desi, but we are going back in a way to be in a more controlled environment.
Which also leads into virtual sets as well.
Yes, virtual production, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
One thing I just wanted to bring up that was mentioned earlier about the number of people on set. One of the, you know, if you take away extras to a certain extent, where sets are often located, particularly on stages, there is so much room to spread people out. And the comments you were making about Video Village and that stuff, whether it be remote or whatever, you know, people have to start just thinking about keeping their social distance. And I think it'll have a lot of beneficial impact. So
I think my point additional to that, Alan, was that if the practice works for the entire crew, you could actually be more productive, that the hair and makeup people and ancillary people aren't looking over the same monitors as the key people. And if they have effective monitoring outside of that group, it'll be actually more productive for everybody.
I agree.
Yeah. Right. If I can try to combine some questions that are related to that. We have one question which basically from Peter Schneider basically says that walkie-talkies are just way too clunky and you're going to need a lot more different types of communication to hold the set together. And then another person says, well, what about all these people like the art department that have to walk around a lot and interface with a lot of different people? How do you deal with them? They just can't, you know, the people who actually have to walk around the set and do.
If I may say, again, the testing regimen that we talked about in the Safe Way Forward is to try to get as close as possible to what it was like before COVID. Even with PPE and social distancing, you're allowed to group some people together in a limited way. So free-floating people from the art department, if they're not part of the testing group, they can't come to set. They just can't. They have to be tested to be able to come to set. So the set deck group or construction or people that are coming to set to do something specific, they have to be tested. And walkie-talkies, well, that's part of everybody's, sanitation procedure. You can still use them. You can also go to those other kind of smaller headsets that I forget the title. Dejan can tell me what those are, but the camera guys often use them. You can start doing those by department. They're very good in a limited group, for a limited group of people, and that's they're high quality. And we all will find new ways to communicate, and we'll work on that, right?
Yeah. But like you said, it's the pod system, as far as the art departments, they're going to have their time to be working in pre-production and, prior, or when they're needed, they're going to be going in as a group, it's not going to be mingled. We're not going to allow them to mingle in, with the different classes.
I think that, when we're working on stages, this is going to be easier than working on location when we're shooting in a tenement, when we're shooting in a, you name it, anything, you're in a bar, whatever. We still want to have stories that take place in real environments. And I know we will probably be adjusting scripts, and Mary Ray's been talking about this too. We're going to probably not have crowd scenes and things like that for a little while, but we still want to have crowd scenes, and we still want to have a populated bar. We still want to have those stories. We can do it through testing and all the other requirements that we have to do, all the other disciplines. So it can happen. As people are talking about short shoots, brief shoots, that could apply to commercials, but we're already seeing it with features in television that are picking up and doing 2-3 day shoots because they have to finish what they were doing before the shutdown. And we've talked to people around the world during the time we were composing this stuff, when we were working, and everybody did this. In your unions, you talk to people abroad, what's going on in Iceland, what's going on in England. And I talked to somebody in Korea where they had a low infection rate, but that's changed somewhat since then. And even on the short shoots, it was described to me, said, you know what, we're taking our chances. We don't know what's going to happen. It could be one day and we shut down. We have a 3-day shoot. One day we shut down. Baseball, 1 day, 2 days, you shut down. It could be anything. So a short shoot is affected just like a long shoot, whatever it is. We've already seen it, and we've seen infections on a TV shoot that was a taped television shoot. I think we were talking about it, Mary Ray, that was in Utah, and it was and they only had a couple days of shooting, but already there was an infection and they had to shut down. So they'll get back to work. They'll finish it, but these things can happen to anybody at any time. So,
Joe, as a follow-up, do you think that when a vaccine becomes available, it should be mandatory? That's a question from.
That's
Julian.
a good question.
Well, we're going to have trouble getting. We're all going to have trouble getting tests. So, and that'll be a struggle when the vaccine comes. Who's going to get it first? What country? And what people within our country? It shouldn't first responders and healthcare professionals get it first, and or will it be will it be political? What will people be fighting over it? But certainly, if we use testing first as an example, when the shutdown first happened, the national shutdown, and basketball players were getting tests and some people tested positive, there was a big reaction to the fact that they were getting tests. And there was a sort of like class warfare a little bit about that. Well, they needed to get tests because they were we were still playing basketball then. That's why the country hadn't shut down, but they were able to get tests. So when we have a vaccine, will we be fighting over that? How will it be distributed? So it's not really, we don't have an answer to that, us on the panel, but it will be a big deal for politically and nationally when there is a vaccine. When it comes.
And the bottom line is, can you require someone to get a vaccine? That's certainly going to be a hot point.
And also, there are going to be multiple vaccines, and they may have multiple efficacies, and that's what I was getting at earlier on. And when this so-called warp speed nonsense, just listen to Dr. Fauci talk about how long it ordinarily takes to develop a vaccine, and there's a reason for that, because they have to do large trials over time. So when you clip off the adequate amount of time to do these large trials, you're rushing in a way that's probably not helpful in terms of feeling secure that the vaccines are effective and safe. So there are going to be multiple corporations. They're all lining up at the feed trough right now to profit from this. And it might be the case that a certain vaccine becomes required, but the other ones aren't acceptable. It's going to be it's unpredictable how this is going to go.
A few of us are old enough to remember the polio vaccine when it first was mandatory, and when everyone went on Saturday to your local school or church synagogue to get it. The whole country went on the same day. There wasn't an anti-vax movement. Everyone did it. And I don't remember, I was too young to remember, but I don't remember if there was like a struggle over who was going to produce it or anything like that, but it was one vaccine that everybody got. And well, polio was wiped out.
Well, it
came back.
Well, it was actually two vaccines, but it also was a not-for-profit regimen.
Right.
Where the goal was to get as much out there as possible. We're like in a for-profit model now, which kind of complicates things. But there's an interesting question that came up from Alan Berger. He wants to know about the SAG extras. He wants to know, how are you going to test them before they come to work? How are you going to deal with that?
So part of this is in the negotiation. Mary, I'm going to take this one. Part of this is in the negotiation that SAG has a view on this. So it will depend on the amount of days you work on a production. We can't talk about it more than this. It says like, if you're using the same people, they become part of the crew. If you're hiring individuals for a particular day because they have a certain look or they belong in that location and you never repeat them, then they're undoubtedly going to have to be tested. But for their membership, they're going to be concerned about people taking multiple jobs within a week, just like if you're in Local 600 and you take multiple jobs within a week, or the IA and you take multiple jobs within a week, and you're a day player technician. So that's all being part of the negotiations. On the testing, some people have thrown around the idea, it's a good idea, of having a passport testing so that it could be used on more than one production. But I don't know how that's going to, we don't know how this is going to end up. But SAG is very concerned about that in terms of making sure their members get employment and that they're safe. But looking at, let's say, if I were doing a project right now and it was going to be a 3 or 4 day shoot and we're going to have 50 extras one day, we would not even say the 3 or 4 day shoot. Let's just say we're going to have 50 extras one day. They would all have to come in on another day to be tested separately. They'd be tested. They would be paid to come in to be tested. And then they would work on the day, cleared to work. They've tested negative. They're cleared to work. And that's the only way to do it. And that would have to be budgeted.
Or Joe, you might be thinking about cross-boarding too. If you got scenes, you'll have that same group, but it'll, like I said, this is that sensitive area of defining aesthetic choices. That's been brought up, as a solution.
Well, I worked for 10 years on Law and Order Criminal Intent, and we had the same group of people in the squad room at least 3 days a week. And in fact, they were so familiar to the viewers that there were drinking games around them. If you see the bald guy, take a drink. But that's ideal in a way, because then you can keep those people. So you maybe have to pay them for 5 days instead of 3 days, but you've got a protected group of your regulars.
But if you're doing a feature film,
different.
Not a series, you're probably already gathering that location together anyway for that reason. there's cross-boarding doesn't mean anything, but you'd still be gathering that together and repeating people and all that.
Right.
But you'd still have those, we're in a bar one day, we never go back. We're in the police station for 5 days. We're in the apartment for 5 days, no extras. You'll deal with that with your health safety supervisor, setting up a testing regimen, a schedule, working with extras casting. Casting itself will be difficult. So, and challenging. So that in the virtual world will be handled. But then, we'll solve it as production people and everybody working together with the unions. We're going to solve all these problems because we got to shoot.
Yeah, Kim Berger has asked a question which is pretty complex and requires a dedicated presentation. She wants to know, will each show decide what the response is if someone tests positive in terms of shutdown? And I'm not going to do, I think that's a complicated enough thing to answer without going through the whole thing. Do you want to take that? Like, will the show decide what the response is? And
that's part of the negotiation on how, because there's a mechanism for people who are testing positive, what happens to them, how they're paid, where do they go? I mean, we have to think first about the infected people. Whether you shut down or not depends on sort of like your strategic resources, the people involved. Do you shut down when your DP gets infected? Do you shut down when the director gets infected? Paramount may say, get another director, get another DP, and they might. So it's a case-by-case basis. If it's a director-driven show, feature film, where the director is the author of that, and you're not going to go and see somebody else make this movie, they'll probably shut down. If it's famous actor in the lead role that's been infected, or even, let's say, a minor part that has been off, they've been dropped from the production temporarily. You know what I mean? Like they shot for 5 days and they have to come back for 2 days, and they've gotten infected in the meantime, and you try to reschedule and you can't figure out a way around it. You may have to pause. Let's not say shut down. That sounds too permanent, but find another way. But some members of the crew, including my role as an assistant director, we could be replaced by someone else. We'll step into that position.
She had it was a very long question, so I tried to edit it so we could get it answered effectively. But she also was wondering if there would be standby people and if there would be sick pay.
Well, again, sick pay is part of the negotiations on what that means. I think if a production wants to have, like baseball has its taxi squad, where you have 2-3 players off in the bullpen or someplace like that, ready to step in that are not on your roster. Okay, you can do that. That's not going to be mandated, from what I understand. But that's not a bad idea. But you'd have to pay them. They're on the crew. They're just not part of the working crew. If a company were to do that, I don't know if that's part of our negotiations, but it's something that producers in New York have talked about.
Well, this has been a fascinating dive into this topic. When I came up with the topic of reopening production in New York City, that I should have put quotes around it, because it was never a simple topic. And you guys have all risen to the occasion. I really appreciate you giving us your time and your insights. I thank each of you, Joe and Mary Ray, Dejan and Andy, Matt, Alan, and Peter. This was recorded. We're going to put this online on YouTube in about a day. We'll have links to all of the white papers that were mentioned. There's far more detail, believe it or not, in some of these white papers than we could even touch today. Again, and I want to thank all of you who were watching, because I really believe that we're going to come back better and stronger. As Pete Abel said, we're going to learn things in the process that are going to make production smoother, easier on everyone, more efficient. It'll bring production maybe up to speed in some ways. That's a shock to the system does that. So again, thank all of you for participating. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Fun.
Check the SMPTE New York YouTube channel in a couple days. We should have video up by the weekend.
Wes, before we go, would it be, I think that since we're going to have it up on YouTube, it might be some of the questions we didn't get to, if people want to post them in YouTube under the comments,
Yeah, that can be done.
Yeah, we could probably answer some of them. Like one question here I just want to address because it's been addressed by New York State is that yes, HIPAA will be followed. If you're doing any medical work on set or in a workplace, they have to follow HIPAA.
Yep.
So I wanted to let that because that's something people feel strongly about, so we should make sure it's out there.
Yep, that's true.
On
Great.
that note,
Thank you.
good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe.
Take care, everyone.